Ultimately, for me, it's 2 points dropped. No questions about that. Yeah, we can say all the nice things that we often say with this one. What a season for Arsenal. Normally ahead of the game or ahead of the season, they would have taken that. They've beaten Arsenal at home as well. So, I mean, 4 points out of 2 games against Liverpool isn't all that bad. But given the fact that we're talking about an incredible chance for Arsenal to win the title, one that they didn't anticipate probably ahead of the season, and a chance that may not come around for a long time, because we never know these things, right? We talk about Arsenal and developing, being young and all that, but everybody will get better and it's going to be tougher. So for me, I quite don't understand how Arsenal gave this away. It's absolutely incredible to me. It's a negative mark, if you can say that, on a very good season, because let's face it, after dominating Liverpool at Anfield in such way that very few do, they needed to see that. If they went into halftime 2-0, I suspect that we would have seen maybe Liverpool like we've seen against Manchester City and Real Madrid in the second half, where they would have lost interest, where the CAP and the fans wouldn't get behind their team like that. Because let's face it, I think the fans won that game for them. There were flashpoints in that game, Kay, as we all know it. But that one goal just before halftime may be the reason that Arsenal ultimately won't win the title.
That's what I'm interested, though, why you can't believe that they did not see that game through, Arsenal, given the fact of what you're saying now, the Anfield factor. They hadn't won there since 2012. We know that Liverpool are not themselves this season, but we know what happens when teams go to Anfield. So what is it that surprised you so much about Arsenal not seeing it through?
Well, because the domination. When is a team or Arsenal going to get a chance like this, where you go to Liverpool and absolutely dominate? The 2-0 up, it's one thing, but just the way they play, I was waiting for the third goal and for the game to be done and dusted. I've said it kind of in a soft way because I don't want to offend Liverpool and their fans, but I think they capitulated against Real Madrid and Manchester City in the second half. Their psyche is so fragile that I think Arsenal, with that opening in the first half, almost confirmed to me that A, Liverpool is done and has been done for a long time now, but B, that Arsenal, if they do win here, I was going to be here for the first time, probably tell you that Arsenal are going to, I'm going to give it to them because they deserve it. So look, subconscious is a massive thing. And I'm reluctant to go back to the jungle and what Arteta has said last season in the documentary and the preparation for the game against Anfield. But that was silly. I wouldn't have never, ever done it. And this is a confirmation of that, because it plays on you a little bit. And we all know what the CAP and Anfield can do. Because, Liverpool were awful. And all of a sudden, everything changed. The difference between, the first 35, 40 minutes to the rest of the game is stark. And no team should be able to lose composure the way Arsenal have done in that second half.
Yeah, because
they're lucky, by the way, to get that point, as we know it.
Which is why then you can see it the other way, right, as well, as why they'd be happy. And you can see why some fans are happy with it. So what did go wrong for them then? Because Stevie and I were talking about this yesterday, Janusz, and you could see when the Arsenal players came out at the beginning of the game, they didn't look phased. Even if they were inside, their body language was very strong coming out at this, that they weren't going to feel, they weren't going to get too emotional about what was going on around them. They weren't going to get too scared about the fact that they were playing at Anfield, because we know we've seen teams that they can get a little bit intimidated by the atmosphere there. But then what did go wrong for them then? Was it their own fault? How could it go from what it did to how it ended with the way you're saying it? What do you think they did wrong to end up only coming away with a point?
Well, it's simple. Simple. The subconscious I've mentioned, and they lost control of the game. Look, when we talk about these two teams, we'll probably briefly talk about Manchester City a little bit later, but I think it's pertinent for me to say this, that the difference between the two and why now I think, I'm still not giving it to anybody, but as everybody knows here, I've been reluctant to give it to Arsenal. I continue to be so even more. And the reason for that is that Manchester City are always in control of the game. Right. And Arsenal, for the most part, have been as well. And this, to me, was so unusual, because details are fine in all of this, because as we go along, as we later look at the schedule of the two teams, one thing I know for sure, that Manchester City will be in control of every game. Now, they may lose a point, but it's not going to be down to the opposition necessarily. It's going to be down to Manchester City of not finishing their chances. They're going to create plenty. They're going to have the ball. They're going to be deciding how the game goes. And Arsenal, up until now, are at the top of the table for the very same reason. And in this game, all of a sudden, from total control, they went to not really knowing what to do, not being able to keep hold of the ball, making silly mistakes defensively. You look at Zinchenko, and, I'm not just talking the second goal, but even the first goal, I thought he was somewhat at fault for not pressuring Henderson on that redirection. Certainly, he wasn't passing to the far post for the goal to Mohamed Salah. But so individual mistakes and lack of controlling the game, and which to me was really, when you look at that, the way the game went, degree of panic.
Were they missing Saliba, Janusz? Would it have made a difference?
No, I'm not going to put it down to that, because I mean, Saliba has been good, but he certainly isn't, one of the best in the world. In fact, I mean, if you look in the weeds, and statistically, I was looking, some of the marks, Rob Holding was actually quite good. I mean, bringing the ball out of the back and progressive passes, he was very good. Defensively, made a mistake for the penalty, I suppose. It's one of those clumsy ones. Didn't have to pay the price for that as well. But I think on a number of occasions, he was actually quite good. And the same thing with Gabriel, with the exception of that first goal. And again, it was a little bit lucky, unfortunate, one of those goals where, Liverpool scored, but there was a degree of luck in that one. So no, this is not Saliba. This is the midfield. I think inability of Odegaard and Partey and Xhaka to a degree of holding onto the ball, unnecessary loss of possession. And we all know that this Arsenal team should be able to dominate Liverpool's midfield, which they did in the first half for long periods of time.
All right. So obviously we talk about Arsenal's attack a lot, but how important is Aaron Ramsdale for them, especially with what we saw in this game?
Yes, I mean, those two saves in the end. I mean, especially the one with the deflection. I mean, that's superb. The one on Konate, he doesn't even know he was in the right place, but that obviously takes courage, and you have to read the game just a little bit. So I mean, he's an important, but at this stage, that's what you ask of winning teams, right? I mean, there's a reason why Liverpool and Manchester City have arguably two of the best goalkeepers in the world, right? In Ederson and Alisson. So as you build a squad to win big trophies, you've got to have a goalkeeper that when questions are asked, he answers. So I don't want to underplay what he did, because he saved them a point. But I expect that from goalkeepers at the top clubs.
Okay, so what it means now is Arsenal are 6 points clear, but City have a game in hand, and the two are still to face each other, which means that it is in the hands of both teams now to win the title. So let's talk about that title race. What's the psychological factor there for Arsenal now, knowing that City have it in their hands too?
I mean, nothing changes. Arsenal still at the top. 6 points are 6 points. I continue to stay on the fence, but as you know, I haven't given it to Arsenal because I worry about Manchester City and their quality. And after these 2 points lost, I look at the schedule. I think the schedule favors Manchester City. Not to say that Manchester City are going to be squeaky clean, but let's remember those runs. Now, 8 wins in the Premier League for Manchester City. Mm-hmm. In all competitions, I think all competitions, 5 straight in the Premier League, which I think beats the record of 4. And that's not necessarily great by City standards, because they have been known to go on runs of 10, 11, 12, 13 wins. I look at that schedule. It favors Manchester City. I think psychologically, after what Manchester City has done so far, not just winning, but scoring 4, 5, 6, 7 goals. I mean, I look at Burnley, right? A team, record breakers in terms of how quickly they came back to the Premier League. Well, they've put 6 past them, right? And, you can go on and on and on what they've done in the Champions League against Leipzig. So this is Manchester City prime at their best right now. And with some of the biggest protagonists playing their best football towards the end of the season. That's why I'd worry if I were Arsenal. game by game. But I look at that stretch where, I have to.
We're going to bring it up for you. Let's bring up Arsenal's stretch for you, because I want to know where you think the problems could be here, Janusz.
Well, the problem is City, Chelsea, and Newcastle. Manchester City away, that's going to be a decider. If Arsenal win that, thank you very much, done and dusted. And all that I've said is nonsense. But if Manchester City win at home, which I suspect may be the case, Chelsea's going to find a good game somewhere, I'm sure.
Really? You're really worried about Chelsea coming to the Emirates right now?
Are they coming?
What's giving you concern from this Chelsea side for Arsenal?
Well, there's still Chelsea Football Club, right? I mean, in those big matches. I mean, you could have said, what gives you concern about Liverpool?
Liverpool still had the Anfield factor. We'd just seen them beat Manchester United 7-0.
Yes, but I mean, it's a derby. It's an Arsenal against Chelsea. It's a Chelsea team that's struggling. Their supporters will look at it now. Okay, season's lost, but this is Arsenal. Let's prevent our local London club from winning the title. I mean, it's simple as that. It's pride. I mean, look, in those games for the rest of the season, and we've seen that, Liverpool, Chelsea, it's going to be very little for those clubs to get up for. But there's always a game on the radar where you say, okay, season's done, but this one we have to win. And I worry about that game, and we may come back to that game, because who knows, Chelsea could take points, and even a point away from that goes towards Manchester City's advantage. And then Newcastle away, come on. I mean, if you look at that, it's going to be incredible. This is the 3-game spell in which I think City has Arsenal, Fulham away, and West Ham at home, that you have to say the season may be decided.
There's a question as to whether, if City beat Arsenal and it's a 3-point gap, will Arsenal slip up again? Mental block in the final stretch, maybe, with City creeping behind them.
Look, schedule is what it is. I mean, we're looking at the big teams. You could see, last game of the season, if it comes down, away to Brentford for Manchester City, not an easy one. We know how tough and how difficult Brentford are in general, but in particular at home, I believe they've only lost a couple of games there. Arsenal was one of the teams that have beaten them there, and Wolves at home for Arsenal. So advantage goes there. I'm looking at form. I'm looking at the squad. I'm looking at the depth of both teams. And I have to say that City at the moment look like they're firing on all cylinders. And all the best players, again, let's have a look at City. I mean, forget about Haaland. With or without makes zero difference. We've seen Manchester City against Liverpool with Julian Alvarez. Absolutely outstanding. For me, the best game Manchester City has played this season in the way they move the ball, right? And we're complaining about Haaland, who now has 30 goals in the Premier League and 44 on the season. In comes Erling Haaland this time. A wonderful header, overhead kick, beautiful, right? I mean, his athleticism, you can't defend him. You can't defend him. Look at De Bruyne, my goodness.
So you're not on the fence at all, really, are you? You're saying City are going to win the title, because you've always been on the fence when it was more in Arsenal hands. Now it's in both teams' hands. I don't understand how you can be on the fence anymore. Who's going to win the title, Janusz?
Well, I can be on the fence because Arsenal are top of the league with 6 points advantage. So, I mean, I can't give it to Arsenal. I can't give it to a team that's in second place right now, because if it plays out, Arsenal are going to win the title. But I've been consistent week on week in not giving to Arsenal when they had 8 points advantage, when I had 10 points or 11 points advantage, simply because I understand the quality of Manchester City. And yes, I'm leaning after this result towards Manchester City. But I mean, how can you give one to somebody that's in the second place right now? But City for me, City are favorites, because I just like the makeup, the way they play, the obviously experience of Manchester City in knowing how to negotiate these last few weeks. And one of the reasons that I'm not giving it to Manchester City outright is because they have to look at Bayern Munich twice in the next couple of weeks, and they have to look at Sheffield United in FA Cup. And that's a lot of games in between. And that's not as easy to negotiate. So that's one of the reasons, or maybe the main reason.
Thank you very much for watching ESPN FC on YouTube. For more highlights, analysis, and exclusive content, be sure to subscribe.